Thank you guys so much for being here. Some great new faces in the building. We're happy to have you, and some familiar faces. Glad to have everyone. This really is designed to just have a conversation. I think we have reached a point in our country where it's hard to even have a conversation, and it's something we continue to remind ourselves and our family that it's okay to have a conversation, even if we don't all agree. We can still have discussions. And so today is about democracy and really what are we working to preserve, and what do we want to have a year from now, 5 years from now? What is it that we've given up, and what are we willing to fight for to make sure we keep? And so the idea of reminding people about civics came back in April when I took my curatorial team over to the Clinton Library, where the National Archivist said, "We've done such a great job teaching STEM over the last decade, we have forgotten to teach civics." I'm like, wow, it's interesting to hear from a curator. She happened to have a political science degree, so she has some bias there, but she really meant about it. And she, later in an email discussion, she said, "You're the perfect place to be teaching civics." And so this summer, we're teaching STEM and we're teaching civics. We're having discussions about civics, and that today begins that. And when we started thinking about who to bring the conversation together, two guys came to my mind who are great civic leaders, both past chairman of the Memorial. Burns Hargis, who was chairman for a year, then left to take charge of this University North at Oklahoma State. But he, incredible civic leader, incredible guider of this mission from the beginning. And then Mike Turpen, who is also another great civic leader and our former chairman. So I think they're the two of the very best to lead this discussion today. And then we invited our Congresswoman Stephanie Bice, just because she is living it, both in the halls of Congress and in the hills and streets of this district, of what it means and how do you meet people in the middle of the street to bring people along as we work to preserve democracy. So with that said, I'll have you guys take your seats and we're ready to go. Is that okay? Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot the video. I forgot to read my own script.
Civic season is a new American tradition that unites our newest federal holiday, Juneteenth, with our oldest federal holiday, July 4th. Why?
We need a new holiday, one that helps us grapple with our nation's promises and our reality.
Co-created by young people and the nation's history institutions, Civic Season is all about learning from the past to power our future.
Civic Season has brought together over 400 organizations, from the Smithsonian's to your local history museums, to design events, programs, and resources to help all of us better understand our country's complex and diverse history.
Today, Civic Season is celebrating hundreds of communities nationwide.
And you're invited. So,
join us.
Let's discover our story together.
Visit thecivicseason.com to build your list of activities and get started.
and follow @History Made by Us for more.
And that really is history made by us.
So here we go. Let's have some history made by us. Burns, Mike, and
Okay, here we go.
Congresswoman Bice.
Here we go. Are we sitting down?
Yeah, have a seat.
Here's your microphone. Why don't you be in the middle? That's where you are politically, in the middle.
Yeah, there you go. No, she's not. She's on there.
Oh, this ought to be good.
You're trying to get her beat, get a primary.
Okay. So thanks for being here, everybody. I would like to officially turn the meeting over to Burns Hargis. Say a few words, Burns.
It's the last time you'll ever hear that.
Yeah.
No, Mike and I have been at it for a long, long time.
Yep.
And we've tried to, when I was on Flashpoint, we tried to disagree agreeably.
That's right.
And for the most part, it seemed to work. Till I got fired and had to go to OSU.
Yeah. There's a TV show called Flashpoint, and I'm not assuming you've watched it, but it's a Sunday morning show. It really has run for about 30 years. And Burns and I started the show with Kevin Ogle about 30 years ago. And Burns was so profound on the show and so effective on the show, he got promoted to be president of Oklahoma State University for roughly 15 years, where he raised more money than any other president in OSU history. Congratulations, Burns.
Well, it paid better than the job at Flashpoint.
It paid better than television. Okay, that's fair.
It really did. Stephanie, welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here. And thank you to Carrie and the Memorial for giving me the opportunity. It's great to be with both of you.
Yes.
I've seen Mr. Turpen recently, and I haven't seen Burns in a while, so it's really great to be able to. And I think Carrie hit the nail on the head. These are two incredible civic leaders in our community that have been for a very long time. And truly, it's an honor for me to be with you both this afternoon to talk a little bit about what's happening in our country and maybe provide some hope.
It's election day, and I thought it'd be appropriate for me to tell you that I like to believe that every 2 to 4 years we have a peaceful revolution in America. It's one of the greatness, I think, one of the greatnesses, is that a word, of our country is every 2 to 4 years we have a peaceful revolution at the polls. I'm going to stop there and have you talk about how it feels like to be a candidate on election day. I know there's no primary, right? But go ahead and tell them what it feels like to be an incumbent congresswoman, and here we're on election day, and here comes November 5th where you're on the ballot. I mean, that's what this is all about, this whole session here today. Democracy. We count votes. Some countries they knock heads, in America we count heads. I just made that up, Burns.
Yeah,
Go
first
ahead.
time I ever heard it.
Yeah.
Well, it's stressful. You know, let me start by giving you all a little bit of background about me. I am a fourth-generation Oklahoman, born and raised right here in the Oklahoma City metro area. Graduated from Oklahoma State University.
Go Folks.
Go Folks. And had a sales and marketing career before I was approached about running for office. Being in politics was not part of my life plan. As a matter of fact, I had never even thought about it. But when I was asked to consider running for the state senate, one of the things that I thought about is, for all of the young ladies in the room here today, there were not enough women serving in our legislature. When I ran in 2014, there were 19 women out of 149, and that is on both sides of the aisle. And my husband and I are blessed to have 2 daughters. And I realized it was an opportunity for me to do something big and bold and outside the box and show them not to be afraid to do the same. So I ran for public office. I had no idea what the heck I was doing. Never thought about doing it before. So it was very much a learning experience for me. Won my Senate seat, won a re-election in 2018 by the largest number of votes of any state legislator. And I thought I was on my way. And then I was encouraged to consider running for Congress. My congressional race in 2020, although it may pale in comparison to what we're seeing with Mr. Cole right now, was the most expensive race in Oklahoma history. $20 million both sides all in. And in Oklahoma, that is a lot of cash. And so here we are. Election day is exciting, it's stressful, but it is an opportunity for each and every one of us to be able to share our voice, to have a say in the process, to choose someone that we think can represent us. And we may not have alike views, we may not have the same ideals or positions on policy, but it's really important that every single person get out and vote. Sometimes you will hear people say, especially young people, my vote doesn't count. Tell some of the city council members that were elected by 3 votes. Tell Jason Dunnington, who was a state house member that I was elected with back in 2014, who won by 7 votes. And a few of those folks, he drove to the polls himself on election day. So regardless of what side of the aisle you are on, your vote matters. And it is a privilege and a right for every one of us to take advantage of this opportunity and go and vote today.
Mm-hmm. I think Carrie is exactly right about the dearth of civics education. I saw some poll that showed people 16 years and younger, something like the vast majority didn't know there were 3 branches of government. And we've just got a lot of work to do to catch up so people understand why this democracy is so special and why it really works. I mean, it's under a lot of strain right now, and I, for one, think questioning the integrity of the system basically questions the integrity of democracy. And so I was talking with Mike, we need to do a much better job of teaching civics in school. We teach Oklahoma history in the 9th grade. That's it. I grew up in Texas. We took it every year. Texas history, not Oklahoma history.
Texas is really hardcore about their history, though, aren't they?
Yeah, my family's from Goliad, and that's where Santa Ana went after the Alamo. So,
I'd like to say that this is self-serving, but why not?
Never stopped you before.
Never stopped me before. I believe in shameless self-promotion, you know. And if you don't,
me too.
Yeah, thank you, thank you.
Kind of like Ron Walters.
Yeah, but be careful. Okay, so strike that from the record, please. What he just said. Okay, so I like to believe that the best thing to happen for women in our civilization is for men to have daughters. Because once a man has a daughter, you look at the world through your daughter's eyes. Burns has a daughter, I have a daughter, you have a daughter. Once you look at the world through your daughter's eyes, you appreciate every woman in this civilization that builds bridges and knocks down barriers for my little girl and my granddaughter now. So I have Sarah and Ren. So that's one of the reasons I've followed your career. And I appreciate that you've been so successful in the legislature and now for Congress. And I'm going to ask you a hard question, kind of, maybe. President Kennedy once said, we all inhabit the same planet, we all breathe the same air, we all cherish our children's future, and indeed we're all mortal. Someday we're all going to die, folks. So those are values right there I think we can kind of all agree on, pretty much. I'm going to ask the Congresswoman a hard question, like what other values can we all agree on? We know what there is to fight over. You see it every day in America, on TV, radio, newspaper. So when you're going door to door and such, what do you see out there that we all believe in together, pretty much? What do people want to get done that we can all get behind besides some of the divisive stuff?
I think there's a couple of things.
Okay.
As a parent, you want to make this place, your community, your city, your state, your country, better than you found it, if you will. You want to make it better for your children and your grandchildren. And maybe people have different opinions about what that looks like. But I would say peaceful communities, good education system, respect for each other. You don't have to agree, but have respect for one another, different values and perspectives. I think that's what people really want. They want to, I grew up in a time, and I feel like I'm suggesting that I'm old, and I don't think that at all, but I grew up in a day and age where you lived in a neighborhood and you knew everyone. You knew the neighbors, you knew the kids, you all went to school together, and there was a sense of togetherness of one community. And I think in some ways we've lost that. For those of you that live in your neighborhoods, do you know your neighbors? Are you familiar? Do you know their children's names? Do you know their dogs' names? We have become a little bit isolated, and I think that's to our own detriment in many ways. We have to find ways to come together. When I was a kid, we used to have block parties. Does anybody remember block parties?
Yeah.
You'd shut the block down and you'd roll out your grill and bring some sodas. Or
homemade
lemonade.
ice cream.
Yes, homemade
Okay,
ice
go ahead.
cream. Peach?
Yeah.
Okay.
Peach is what my mother made. Yeah.
And you would just, socialize, get to know each other, understand. And I think we're missing that today. It's much easier to see what's happening via social media than it is to walk next door and sit down and have a cup of coffee with your neighbor.
Go ahead.
Well, I think part of it is we just can't have conversations. If somebody disagrees with us, they're evil. There's something awful about them. And the beauty of a democracy is you have this huge amalgam of views and races and beliefs, and that only works if we talk and talk about things. And often we will. I mean, Mike and I probably agree on more things than we don't. But of course, sometimes on Flashpoint he'd say, "I don't really care about this issue," and I'd say, "Okay, well, you be against it, I'll be for it."
Yeah.
We just
high school debate, pick a side.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I really wish people could just calm it all down. But unfortunately, we have at the national level, not just in politics, but in media and all the rest. Everybody's taking sides, and you don't. I grew up under Henry Bellman. He was the one that, and to me, Henry Bellman was probably what I guess a lot of people in Congress, and Stephanie's one of them, have been like. But I'll never. For you young folks, you don't know anything about the Panama Canal Treaty, but it was very controversial. And I was working, we're getting a paycheck from Henry, but I was. I remember we were outside Crossroads Mall, and he said, "I've decided to vote for the Panama Canal Treaty." I went, "Oh, Henry, goodness gracious, we just got through with busing." And he said, "Well, now here's what I think," and he went through the reasons that he believed it was the right thing to do. And I said, "Henry," he said, "Well, what's the worst that could happen?" I said, "Well, you won't get reelected." He said, "Yeah, and then I get to go back to the farm. I like the farm a lot better than I like Washington, D.C."
Yeah.
But that kind of attitude. But it seems like today too many of Stephanie's colleagues are mainly worried about a primary. They just don't want to. If a Republican moves a little bit to compromises with the Democrats, they're going to get a primary from the right. If a Democrat compromises with the, and compromise is what democracy is all about. I mean, nobody gets everything they want, and if you did, then you're a dictator. So, anyway, that's my 2 cents.
I think it's really important for us, though, we talk about learning about civics, and I wholeheartedly agree. I remember when I was in 8th grade, I walked into my 8th grade civics class. It was a 9-week class, and there were, again, I'm going to date myself, it was a chalkboard, and there were...
A chalkboard.
A chalkboard.
Everybody hear that? Okay.
There were words written on one chalkboard for one party, and words written on another chalkboard for another party. And I vividly remember that. I thought, this is interesting. You're being sort of self-selected into groups. But it was the introduction to what people tend to believe based on which group they belong to. But it was also a great introduction and understanding of what government's about. So I agree that we should be teaching about civics, but I also think that we should be teaching history, maybe in a different way, and here's why I say that. There was an article written last week in Politico by a gentleman who is a historian, and he talked about the past and how we tend to believe today that this is a very difficult time in our country, that we are worried about the future, we're uncertain that things are going to, fix themselves. But he talked about the period after the Civil War and before the 1920s. It was a very difficult time in the country. You had just ended the Civil War, so there was huge divides across the U.S. States were divided still. And one of the points that was made in the article was that during that 60-plus year time frame, there was a member of Congress executed, shot, killed, whatever the word you want to use, every 7 years. Every 7 years. You had the caning of Sumner on the Senate floor. 2 senators got into it, one beat the other one up. You had sort of this just tense division within the country. But we got over it. And we came together again. And people recognized that democracy is imperfect. This is a sort of a test case, right? But it's still the best way to govern. It's the best form of government in the world. And yes, it takes some time to sort of cycle through, but we will get there. It just takes a little bit of time.
This may shock you for me to say the number, but on this sacred ground right here, it's already been almost 30 years ago. How about that? That the bomb went off in Oklahoma City. I'm talking 30 years ago this next year. I like to believe that this community turned their darkest hour into their finest hour based on how we all came together. And part of that was everything both of you are suggesting, trying to better conversation. We had a Democrat president named Bill Clinton. He had just been elected. He was 2 years into office when the bomb went off in Oklahoma City 30 years ago, almost. And we had a Republican governor, Frank Keating. And believe it or not, they had both gone to Georgetown University together. So thank goodness, thank God, you had two men in this case, two leaders that already knew each other and reached out to each other and brought Billy Graham in here for that incredible memorial service that helped bring the country together. It truly was a time about right and wrong and not right and left in Oklahoma City 30 years ago. And next year, you're not surprised that Kerry is already working on it, that we'll have Bill Clinton and Frank Keating right here front and center again and talking about everything I just talked about. Why does it take something like that to bring us together? Because it did bring us together. We came together. Bill Clinton said, Oklahoma City, you broke our hearts, but you lifted our spirits, based on how we came together with the Oklahoma Standard and leadership going forward. Darn it, Burns.
The interesting thing, of course, we got some cheat sheets here, but the interesting thing about that is that I don't know where this came from, but I assume it's correct, that the early 90s was an all-time low for public trust in government. And the late 90s, it was the highest it's ever been. And what's interesting about that is you had Bill Clinton, a Democrat. You had Newt Gingrich become Speaker of the House, who was about as acerbic as you could get.
Yeah.
And yet, at the time, and I got to give you credit, we balanced the budget for the first time in who knows when. But public trust was at an all-time high. I don't know what it is now, but it's got to be close to an all-time low.
And I will say, one of the things that I think about is today you have more transparency in government than you have ever had before. You want to know what's happening on the House floor? Turn on C-SPAN. You want to know what's happening in a committee hearing or see someone testifying before Congress? Turn on C-SPAN too. You want to read the text of the National Defense Authorization Act to understand what we're doing for our military? Go to congress.gov. There is more transparency in government today than you've ever had in the history of the country. But unfortunately, as Burns mentioned, there's also more distrust than ever before. And I think that's what we have to focus on, is how do we improve the, build confidence in the system again? How do we build trust within government, certainly within Congress and the Senate, but also within government as a whole?
And this is maybe not all that relevant, but back on Bellman.
Henry Bellman, the first Republican governor.
He told me that he thought what's gone wrong in Washington, I'd be interested in your take on this, is when Congress, this thing of Potomac fever started being brought up. And so then you could fly home every weekend, leave Thursday, come back on Monday. He thinks that did more to destroy the relationships, because he said when we couldn't do that when he was in the Senate. It just wasn't possible. And so you went to church together, you went to Little League games together.
In D.C.
Yeah, and you had a life apart from whatever the divisive issues of the day were. And he didn't know anybody. Of course, he had very good. Of course, a lot of Republicans thought he was half Democrat anyway. But
yeah, Henry Bellman.
Yeah, but he believed in compromise. He believed in getting things done.
Yeah.
I actually think that is a really great analogy or analysis, because you hear people say, when I am home, they will see me at the grocery store, they will seat me out to dinner with my family, and they'll say, you're home? And I said, yes. And they said, do you like living in Washington, D.C.? And I have to correct them, and I say, I don't live in Washington, D.C. I work in Washington, D.C. I live in Edmond. But I agree with your assessment. People have an expectation that we live there, even though most of us do not. And there are some downsides to that. We don't get to build those relationships. We don't get to understand and know people on a different level. And that does make it much more difficult. There are opportunities for us to get together. There are members of the House that have created, you will appreciate this, the Reagan-O'Neill Club.
Okay.
Tip O'Neill, Ronald Reagan, who couldn't be more sort of politically opposite in many ways, but they became very good friends, oftentimes talked policy over alcoholic beverages.
Irish whiskey.
They're Irish whiskey, you are correct. But they became really great friends because they were able to spend time together. And I think that is one of the things that we are challenged with right now in D.C. is not having enough time together.
There's a book I just finished called The Good Life, and the book ends with the 4 R's. Some of you may know the first 3 R's. We kid in Common Ed mostly reading, writing, arithmetic are the 3 R's in common education. The book suggests the 4th R is reading, writing, arithmetic, and relationships. And then we ought to teach more social and emotional learning, if you will, and just developing relationships. Because Burns has heard me say this, you may have. My mantra for life is personal contact alters opinions. Personal contact alters opinions. If you can just get to know somebody. So go ahead and take that. How can we do better on that?
Well, okay, this is a great segue. As you can probably imagine, I get some pretty fiery emails in my office. Sometimes they use foul language. And after a particularly difficult vote, my staff told me that we'd gotten a lot of email correspondence and quite a few phone calls. And I said, great. I want you to pull a list of everyone that's emailed my office, and I want you to pull out the particularly ugly ones. They're really angry. They've said some nasty things to me. Pull them out. And they said, why? And I said, because I'm going to call them up.
Okay.
And I did.
Yeah.
And I will never forget. I called, I think there were 5 that I called, and I got a hold of 3 of them. And it is amazing what happens when you call someone and they pick up the phone and you say, hello, sir. This is your Congresswoman Stephanie Bice. I received your email, and I hear you're a little upset.
And this is not a recording. Go ahead.
And the next thing they say is, Congresswoman, hi. They are completely flabbergasted that I would pick up the phone and call them. And every single one of those folks that I had the opportunity to actually talk to at the end of the call told me how much they appreciated the discussion, how impressed they were that I took the time to call them, and how they would be supporting me in the future. We didn't agree on the issue. Mm-hmm. They still were very dug in on, and I don't remember exactly what this particular one was, but they were dug in on their issue. But when I explained my position, they said, I don't agree with necessarily everything that you've given me, but I at least appreciate the fact that you took the time to reach out. That's important.
How available are you? I mean, do you try to be to like the people in this room and beyond? I have no idea. Go ahead.
I mean, we do a town hall every month.
Okay.
Certainly in person is a little challenging given the schedule that we've had, but also safety and security has been a big problem for members across the country. But we do a telephone town hall almost every month. Summer we take some time off because the engagement isn't there. But we do try to make sure that we are communicating with our constituents. We also, I make it a point to try to respond through my office to all of the email correspondence. We also have a team that responds to phone calls when people call in. We try our best. Certainly it's difficult with the volume that we have, but we try our best to make sure that people recognize that we're engaging with them and are hearing and listening to their voices.
What is the life balance for you with these 2 daughters and a husband and going back and forth to Washington? Just kind of let us understand how you balance all this.
Well, first of all, let me say a huge shout out to American Airlines and Southwest Airlines for the direct flights that they provide us,
all right,
which makes life a lot easier for members like myself. I come home every weekend. If I'm, not in DC for some other reason or traveling, I am here every weekend. I come home, usually session is Monday through Thursday or Tuesday through Friday. We are typically in session 2 to 3 weeks out of the month, depending on the month. Lately it's been 3 weeks plus. But you are busy when you are there from sunup to sundown, and then the fly out day, I fly home, and typically I'm home for dinner, so I get to have dinner with my husband. Our oldest daughter has graduated from college and is gainfully employed, and our younger daughter is actually working in DC this summer. So it is a life balance, work-life balance for me. But the good news is I have an incredible spouse. He is so supportive and appreciative and makes sure that things get done when I'm not there. And I could not do this without my family support system and a really, really incredible group of friends, too, that are willing to pick up the baton and run with it when I can't. This is a hard job. I actually thought about this the other day. I liken what I do to a professional athlete because
Caitlin Clark.
Caitlin Clark's a great example
right
now.
Well, I'll just...
Someone is always wanting to take me out politically, right? They want to defeat me in some way. People say really awful things in person, on social media, whatever. And you as the athlete / politician are just trying to do the right thing. But you're always having to sort of look around and figure out, where's the incoming come from? And how do we sort of tamp that back a bit?
Talk a little bit about this place, the memorial, the museum, what it means to you, and honestly, candidly, thankfully, what you've done to help us.
This is a really special place for me. I was finishing my senior year in college on April 19th. And the guy I happened to be dating at the time was working in these guys will know what this is, the Liberty Tower, which is now Bank
Bank
First.
First, yeah.
And saw the aftermath. And a month later, that nice young man asked me to marry him. But it had a profound impact on him. He will, unfortunately, he cannot step foot in the memorial, the museum itself. It's just too much. He had a classmate, Julie Welch, who perished in the bombing. And a very dear friend of his and employee over the years, his father was one of the victims of the Oklahoma City bombing as well. So I think we all have those stories here, though. We all know someone or are connected to someone. And so it's a personal connection for everyone in this room. And for me, I think it's just a reminder of what we can do when we are put to the test, right? The Oklahoma standard, how we stand up and say, this is a terrible tragedy that should never happen, not in Oklahoma, not in anywhere. How do we make sure that this doesn't happen again? So this place is an inspiration, actually. It is hope. It is making sure that we are educating the next generation. And it's pretty special. And I'm incredibly thankful to both of you for being such an integral part of it and making sure the legacy lives on, and certainly to Carrie and her team for making sure that we do not forget what happened here on April 19th, 1995.
That particular answer deserves a round of applause, I think, from everybody here. No, really, thank you. It's very well said. And she's helped us in Congress as well. She didn't go into details there, but I appreciate that very much. Go ahead, Burns.
I'd be curious if some of the teens in the audience, what your definition of democracy is and how it impacts your lives. Then we're going to try to figure out if there's a generational
This is the part of the program where I like to say somebody has to have the courage to break the silence of the room with the sound of their voice, which is not easy to do.
But it's never been hard for you.
It's never been hard for me. That's something you're right, Burns. So somebody tell us what you're thinking about what democracy means, should mean, could mean. Go ahead.
Well, so...
Wait, can I ask you to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from?
My name is Bryce Adler. I technically live in Oklahoma City, but I go to Edmond Memorial. In my opinion, my idea of democracy is whether directly or indirectly a government that would be run in some way by the will of the common people.
Anybody else?
What's it, the will of the people?
No.
Hi, my name is Layla Cochran. I think democracy is to me, I think it's a government that is willing to do what the people want and listen and hear them out to the people, but is also willing to vote for what they think is right and what is in their mind and their gut feeling, but also listening to the people at the same time.
I think that's actually, she brings up a really great point. Certainly, I am always wanting to make sure that the voice of my constituents are heard, but sometimes there are policy areas that we have to make decisions based on a gut instinct. And recently we had a vote on reauthorization of something called the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. And there were quite a few individuals that did not want me to support it. They felt like it was an encroachment on the constitutional rights of citizens. And in fact, it wasn't. It actually only applies to non-citizens that are outside of the United States. But the message was misconstrued. And because I have access to classified briefings on the issue, I knew very much the importance of it. Now, had it been abused? 100%. Were we addressing that in the legislation that we were putting forward that also reauthorized this program? Yes. But I voted for it because I recognized the importance of protecting this nation from a national security perspective. Wasn't an easy vote. I got a lot of heat for it. People were very upset. Why would you take away people's constitutional rights? I didn't. But it was, to her point, it's a great one. Sometimes we as members of Congress make decisions that we know may be unpopular with a loud minority, but it's protecting the majority of the country, and we're willing to take those sacrifices.
And that takes political courage.
Yeah.
Now, we can have multi-generational speakers, so.
Yeah.
Who wanted?
Hi, my name's Lauren Ripple, and I'm a lifetime Oklahoma City resident. And just for a mid-range adult perspective, I would have to say, truly, democracy has to be not just the will of the people, but ensuring that every American citizen is represented, that no American citizen has been deemed second class or is targeted, because as long as there is any American that feels that they are subjugated or not equal with all inalienable rights that we are guaranteed under the Constitution, we are truly not engaging in democracy.
Let me comment on that real quick. Then back to you. I want to give credit to James Lankford, U.S. Senator from Oklahoma. I'm saying that because I'm not presuming anybody knows exactly who your senators are or the Congress. Anyway, James Lankford, U.S. Senator from Oklahoma. He has started the idea in Oklahoma about Solution Sundays. Solution Sundays. And the idea would be, he says, to, after church or synagogue or whatever your religious beliefs are on Sunday, invite somebody over to your home of a different religion, different ethnicity, a different walk in life, have them come to your home and break bread, because he says you can't really get all the issues on the table until you have your feet under the same table. He talks eloquently about the multi-ethnic family of humankind. Ladies and gentlemen, we're all in this thing together. That's James Lankford, me talking about James Lankford. So I appreciate that kind of leadership when it comes to bringing people together. He says America is not really a melting pot only, it's a mixed salad. And I'm proud of him for saying, James Lankford, I would say a conservative Republican, I'm proud of him for saying that diversity is our strength. A lot of people don't say that, particularly on the Republican side of the aisle. Take that and run with it. I'm putting you on the spot.
I haven't heard James say that, so that's wonderful. But I would also say, I think certainly I want to be respectful of other people's positions, whatever the issue may be. But I'm also elected by the majority, right? And so you have to sort of balance what makes sense versus what the people's will is. And that's what's hard sometimes is I try not to let my own perspective get in the way of the way I'm going to vote. That's not why I was elected. I wasn't elected for my own ideology. I was elected because the people have a certain perspective they want heard. And so I try to remember that when I am casting votes on the floor.
You know, it's about religion and not democracy, but it's all wrapped up in the same ball, I think. Peter Denman, who's a professor at OCU, and I taught a comparative religion course. And we brought in some religions I didn't even know existed. And it was fascinating because as you work through it, it all, regardless of the religion, came down to the same thing. It was all about the freedom of the individual, the joy of life, being unimpeded to pursue your dreams. Every religion boils down to that sooner or later. And that was a real eye-opener for me.
Well, I happen to believe every religion believes that we're all touched with a divine spark of infinite goodness, and that goodness is the greatest power on this earth. I happen to believe that. Now, how do we bring that out of each other becomes a real challenge for our political leaders and all of us. How do we bring the best out of each other?
Well, I'd like
help
to
me with that.
Well, we haven't talked much about the media, but I think the media gets a lot of blame for this. And then on the other hand, the media is, KOSU that of course we have, you know, used to be the Daily Oklahoman. If you walk through the Daily Oklahoman newsroom, it is so sad how few people are in there that should be watching for all of us. You know, at City Hall, they had to give up. Steve Lackmeyer was the City Hall head beat for a long time. They can't afford to have somebody over there watching and paying attention. And so that's the shortage side. The other is, though, is and it probably started with Roger Ailes. Everybody just is cording themselves off into one line of thought.
Silos.
So if you're toward the right, you want to watch Fox. If you're toward the left, you're going to watch MSNBC. We don't have anybody that's trying to go down the middle and point out the virtues and the problems with various issues. And it's I'm sure you see it all the time.
Yeah, I do, and that's probably why I don't watch a lot of news. Or I try to read a lot, and I read different publications to make sure I'm getting a perspective on all sides to
Do
understand.
you mind telling us what you read?
Sure. I will read Politico. I read Punchbowl News. There are a lot of these that are DC sort of centric.
Yeah.
But they give you a good perspective. I will read The Hill. I'm trying to think of what else. I have
Wall Street Journal.
Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, New York Times. I mean, I try to read a broad swath of things because I recognize that sometimes the message does get skewed.
Yeah.
And so for me, I want to be able to understand the dynamics of the message and what's being said, and that helps me frame it in a better way.
Would you take the time to tell the young people that are here, maybe even some of the older people, how old you were when you first ran and why they should consider running for school board or city council, or how you started was state senate?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, you're never too old to run for office.
Burns?
No.
Oh. Okay.
I'd only run against you. That's the
if I run, he'll run. We got something going there, Carrie. Okay, it's a big fundraiser for the Memorial Museum.
There we go.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm in, by the way.
You're in. But the young people, how old were you when you first ran?
I was 40.
Really? Okay.
And I just turned 50 last November.
Tell the young people why they should maybe run for office.
Because you are the future.
Yeah.
And you all have a different perspective. You know, I mentioned my husband and I have two amazing daughters.
What's their name? I wanted to ask you that earlier.
Isabella is my oldest. She's 23.
Yeah.
And Ainsley. Anybody watch The West Wing?
Well, sure.
Ainsley Hayes. I named my kid after the West Wing character. I full
See how progressive she
there.
is? Okay,
yeah.
go ahead. Yeah, okay.
The conservative, yeah. There we go.
Go ahead.
I forgot what you were asking.
Why should the younger people, why should they run for office if they ever think about doing so?
Well, you all are the future, but you all bring a different perspective. And my daughters, they have a different perspective of things, right? My oldest daughter is very much sensitive to the idea of the environment and making sure that we're doing the right thing, treating the planet properly, right? She sees that and understands and recognizes it and is making small changes because she understands the importance of it. We just see things through a different lens, and I think that's really important. But that's also why I'm here, right? I'm 50, but I feel like I bring a different perspective, not only because of age, but because of being a woman. And I think that we all have to have those diverse perspectives to find a way to come together and make policy that's in the best interest. So it takes old and young alike.
So you heard what you said. Step up and run for city council,
and let me also
school
say
board.
this.
Go ahead.
You know, I don't think people recognized the importance of their local elected officials, their school board officials, until COVID hit. I used to say to people all the time, you may vote for your state elected officials, you may make sure you go to the polls in November to vote for president, but your local elected officials matter so much. And people didn't understand that. And then when COVID hit and people began to see school boards making decisions about whether or not school was going to be open or how that was going to be structured, whether or not you had certain restaurants open, times, then it became, I think, very clear that these positions mattered. And now you have seen a lot of individuals that are willing to step up and say, I want to be a part of this. Not because I want power, but because I want a voice, and I want to make sure that every voice is heard. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, I ran for governor in 1990, which was not a good idea, as it turned out.
How'd it turn out?
It's funny, I was at an event in California, and Arnold Schwarzenegger was there. And I told him, I ran for governor once. He said, it's not such a good idea, is it?
Yeah.
But it was remarkable because there were issues that people brought up I just never thought about. It just had never occurred to me. I didn't really have an opinion on it one way or the other. And so I'd always say, well, educate me on that. Tell me why we ought to do that. And it was a tremendous learning experience. It was a pretty expensive learning experience, but it was great. And I actually ran third. But the other two are good friends to this day, and so I recommend it. Everybody ought to do it once.
Yeah.
Something.
Now, the one-liner we used to use, Burns and I both ran for governor and lost. Our races for governor were so bad that we put the word goober in gubernatorial. That was our humor back in the day. Now, then they gave us a TV show. That's been a few years ago.
I was talking to a guy in Ardmore, and he said, "You're a lawyer, ain't you?" And I said, "Yes, sir." And he said, "You know how it grease? You know how many lawyers it takes to grease a combine?" I said, "No, how many?" He said, "One, if you run him through just right."
Yeah. Okay. Oh my gosh.
Do you want to take some questions?
Sure.
All right.
Keep going.
A comment, question?
All right. Thank you so very much, Representative Bice and Hargis and Turpen and Hargis. I apologize.
Yeah, okay.
Gentlemen. All right.
Yeah.
I was 14 as a student at Star Spencer High School when the bombing happened, and my friend's mother, Wanda Howe, passed away, and that is a moment that I will never forget. And one thing that, when I think about the history of our country, the country wasn't built or wasn't made for me, but I was made for my country. I vote, I teach, I'm a public school educator, so I try to teach my students the truth. And I think we talked about values earlier, and I think the value of truth, whether it's we have different news values and people sources, and we have different political parties, but the truth should be the one constant that's objective. And when I think about being a resident here in Oklahoma City and knowing that there were 168 people who passed away here, and I would consider that an attack on our country. And I would also think that nobody else in this room would probably argue that. And you fast forward to January 6th, I would think that would be an attack on our country. And I would also think that nobody in this room would argue that. But the problem is that we have leaders and people who have power and have a platform who have decided to change what we all would agree as the truth of what happened to fit a worldview that allows them to maintain power. And we talk about what is democracy. Democracy is, can we agree on what's true? Okay? I think in a nutshell, that's what democracy is. Should we all have the right to speak freely? Should we all have the right to vote? Those are truth values. And should we all have the right to look at what happened here and not call Timothy McVeigh a hostage or a warrior? And we shouldn't look at people and he shouldn't be eligible for a pardon had he still been alive. We have people in our government right now who are actively running for office who you support that are saying that if they get elected, they think about pardoning people who participated in the attack on the Capitol that day.
Well, Felix, first of all, it's nice to see you.
Yes.
And I understand that my office gets to chat with you quite a bit.
Peacefully, I will add. Civically, I might add.
Yeah. Look, I don't agree with some of those positions. We all have differences of opinion. For me, I was there on January 6th. I lived it. I was in the gallery. I was mad. I was really mad. These individuals had done damage to the institution, but also the foundation. And it's not okay. Some of them are being prosecuted as they should. Some of them, I believe also, these trials have been dragged on for a very long time and they shouldn't have. There's a whole range of things that are going on with that. But you and I don't agree on issues, right?
We never had a chance to talk, but let's talk. Go ahead. That's what we're here for.
I'm gonna assume, based on some of the conversations you've had with my team, you and I do not agree on every issue. There are people that I serve with in Washington, D.C. that I don't agree with their position on certain issues. That doesn't mean that I don't think that they are best suited for a specific role either, though. Look, I think we can all agree, and I don't mind getting a little political here. I don't think we can, a lot of us in this room would say maybe the best choices aren't the ones that are presented before us, but these are the choices that we have. This is what the American, sort of to the point that she mentioned about democracy. These are the people that were chosen, and this is the decisions that we have to make.
I think, though, I'd comment on your point about the truth, because I think that's at the core of a lot of problems. We can't agree on what the truth is. I mean, once we all can agree on the truth, then we can respond to it in maybe different ways. But I just see it very difficult to get an agreement on what the truth is.
Yeah, let me say something, and I think you've already commented on it. But on our little TV show that Hargis and I started 30 years ago, Republican candidate for higher office, off the air, on the air, talked about January 6th and said the only person that died that day was a Trump supporter. It's true when you think of who was killed that day. All right? For those that don't know all the details, that day one person died. The next day a Capitol police officer died. And since then 5 Capitol police officers have committed suicide. Okay, it didn't happen that day. I get that. Technically speaking, that Trump person died. Okay, so now the show's over, and I'm disappointed in how he's talking about that. He won't give any respect to the Capitol police.
I'm glad you said he, by the way.
Okay, it was he. And so I said, off the air, I said, January 6th, what you just said? He says to me, Mike, January 6th was the single worst day in Republican Party history. I said, well, I can't say that in Oklahoma. I mean, no, seriously, you guys, because I mean, I respected what he said to me. He was saying that I'm running for office, I want to win. He did not win, by the way, but I said, might as well try the truth. You're running behind anyway right now. But it was okay. So let's deal with that reality that for people that want to be elected, they've got to say certain things. And he told me, truthfully, off the air, not on the air, that it was a bad day for Republican Party history. It was a bad day for America. It was a bad day for everybody. You said it pretty well. I appreciate what you said, that you were there, you were upset, and you thought some of those folks should be prosecuted. That's what's happening. We got to sort it all out, but golly, hard issues, and we're all in this thing together.
Just think where we are on the election in 20. I mean, the majority of the Republican Party, they say, believe the truth is that Trump won, that it was stolen, that the election was stolen. And of course, and I'll just tell you, I don't think it was stolen. I think it turned out the way it turned out. But that's an example of where we can't agree on what the truth is.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Another question.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here. Greatly appreciated. My name is Mike Kornbluth. I'm from Edmond, Oklahoma as well. Both of my parents were Holocaust survivors. Democracy to them was very important. When they first became citizens, they never missed a vote when that came up, any kind of election that they would go and vote. And they passed that on to me and my brother. We have 2 anniversaries coming up. The first one is August the 2nd, will be the 60th anniversary of the Civil Rights Act that was passed. The next anniversary is this Friday. It will be 60 years when 3 young men named James Chaney, Goodman, and Schwerner were murdered in Mississippi when they had gone down there to try and register black voters, and were murdered by members of the Ku Klux Klan and law enforcement. If we haven't learned why it's so important for people to be able to vote, and as somebody said back there, everybody, and as the gentleman there said, everybody being able to vote, then why is it that in this country, 294 bills have already been introduced in legislatures in 30 different states to limit what people can do as far as voting is concerned? We shouldn't be making it more difficult for people to vote. We should be making it easier for people to vote.
So I'm gonna challenge your question, because I agree with the fact that we should make it voting more accessible, but how we do that's very different. And so for me, when you have a state like Washington or Oregon that does 100% mail-in balloting, and the only way that they verify the ballot information is through a signature. Mike, do you sign your check the same way that you signed it 20 years ago?
Absolutely not.
So my point is, that's where you're seeing people step back and say, wait a minute. We want to make sure that there's validity in the process. I have said, I used to be in the state legislature in Oklahoma, and I actually oversaw the state election board. And I will tell you that Oklahoma has some of, if not the best, election laws in the country. You don't have to have a reason to ask for an absentee ballot vote, or an absentee ballot. You have access to early voting. It's not as long as some other states, but certainly it's access, right? We need to do a better job in engagement, candidly. There are also issues, you talked about all of these bills. There are some states that don't clean up their voter registration rolls. So people that either moved out of state, and the guy running against Tom Cole, I mean, he could have been a perfect example of that. I guarantee you he's still registered in Texas. So that's the kind of stuff that we're looking at doing. I sit on the House Administration Committee. I sit on the election subcommittee in that. And we are trying to find ways, thoughtful, reasonable ways, to fix some of these things so we can ensure that people do get the chance to vote, but there's trust in the process, because right now there is concern about it. You have states that are using electronic balloting. Those machines are networked. And you have computer experts, cybersecurity experts that are saying that's a really bad idea. You shouldn't do that. So I want to make sure that you understand all of those things that are being proposed are not things that are limiting people's ability to vote.
Some of them are, if you go back and look at what's being proposed. I'm sorry, they are.
We have the hand up back here if it's been up.
I think we're quickly running out of time, but I think we have one comment and maybe one question.
What time is it?
5 till 3 till 1.
My name is Elizabeth. Randomly, and those of you who know God knows nothing is random, I am from Seattle, Washington. Randomly parked with a Navy. I did not serve in the Navy. I was a Marine Corps wife for 10 years before I knew I was gay. I'm here to tell you that the Washington elections are some of the most secure in the country. I have no idea who you are. You are my sister in whatever divinity you pray for, because in America, we do not discriminate against religion. I am in Seattle a chaplain, former police officer in Washington, D.C., married to a spy originally before I knew I was gay. I love a captive audience. I have no idea who the three of you are. Some of you are elected. Who's elected?
This lady.
Right. I don't care if you have an R or a D or an I. I am way to the left of you, and probably to Felix. I have been traveling around this country for several weeks. The work that I do requires me to be armed. I am not a police officer. I am not a bounty hunter, although I've been accused of it in the last 48 hours. But what you said about Washington elections, wrong. They are some of the most secure in the country. And yes, every ballot is mail-in. The addresses, etc., are protected. I am a address confidentially protected person with a lived experience of domestic violence, and fled to where God told me to go. Turns out it was a blue state where we believe that people should eat, and people should have housing, and people should be able to go to the doctor when they need to. I've been traveling this country now for about 6 weeks. Thank God I'm away from my kids. Yes, gay people can have children, and sometimes the natural way.
Hey, folks, if you don't mind,
Yeah.
I'd like to talk to you afterwards.
Absolutely.
I'm serious, because I love Seattle, and I like what you're saying.
Right.
But our time's up, and I want to say this real quickly.
Poverty is endemic in this country, I have to add.
I hear you. I'm coming back to talk to you. I really am. Okay, I want to say this to you real quick, and I want you guys to close it out. I brought one book with me. It's Democracy in America by Tocqueville. There it is. Oh, there you go. Hold it up. Democracy in America by Tocqueville. And he says in that book, the greatness of America are friendships that transcend the political divide. The greatness of America are friendships that transcend any political issue. That's what we're here about today. That's the greatness of America. Go ahead, Burns, and you close it out.
No,
we're friends, Burns.
I know we're friends.
And we don't agree on all the political issues, but
no, we don't. We don't. But we do agree that Stephanie Bice is a great member of Congress.
Okay. So now you get to close it out, Stephanie. Because we're right on time or we're running a little over.
Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you for the dialogue. And thank you to Carrie and her team for organizing this wonderful discussion. It's, I think, such a privilege for me to be a part of it, and we need more of this. We need more of this every day. The more we can talk these things out, the better off we all are. I have had relationships in the past that I had, wonderful friendships, and they have walked away from me because they didn't agree with my ideology. And that's really unfortunate and sad in a lot of ways. And I think we have to get past that. So thank you to the Oklahoma City National Memorial and to the staff. And thank all of you for being here and participating in this really wonderful conversation today. It's very appreciated.
Okay, thank you both. Thanks for being here.